Bernard-Henri Lévy is here. For the past 6 months, he's been traveling across the United States. His mission was to recreate the famous journey of another Frenchman, Alexis De Tocqueville. In 1831, the young French aristocrat traveled to America for 9 months. This became the basis of his seminal work, Democracy in America. The first installment of Lévy's 5-part series, In the Footsteps of Tocqueville, will appear in this month's issue of Atlantic Monthly magazine. I am pleased to have him back at this table. Congratulations. Great to see you. And I should say this will become a book that will be out in the fall.
Exactly, in Random House.
In Random House. Here is the cover. America in Foreign Eyes. A Frenchman hits the road and takes our measure. Tell me, before we understand what you found about America, how this originated. You, Atlantic Monthly, De Tocqueville, across America.
Atlantic, of course, they had the idea. I would never have myself the idea of putting my feet in the footsteps of such a great man as Tocqueville. But I accepted immediately. And I accepted immediately because I felt that America was at such a critical point of its history. Is the empire dying or not? Is it an empire or is it not? Is there a deep crisis in the city of America or not? That I wanted to see with my own eyes. I thought that it was the very period to try to see grassroots what is America like today.
So what did you do?
What I did what I did all my life, but in different countries, which is travel and observe. Chose vues, as Victor Hugo said, chose vues, seeing things. I went in every single state of this country. I went to big cities and little towns. I went to average people, very average people, and big names, of course, from President Bush to candidate Kerry to people of Hollywood and so on, but also very average people. I went to see what happens in a race car in Knoxville.
NASCAR.
NASCAR, yes.
Right.
This very strange ceremony, a sort of religious ceremony with a sort of sense of tragic. I try to see these people praying before the race, the drivers praying too, as if there was something like the smell of death around. I went, I don't know, for instance, I visited the Mall of America in Minneapolis, which is such a strange invention, this false, fake life, where you can do everything in life. You can marry, you can go to school, you can open an account in a bank, you can flirt and nearly make love in this sort of confined, closed place. And so I went, I think, nearly, not everywhere, of course, but in really a lot of places. I know this country better than I knew before.
Okay, we'll come to that again. So you set sail in a Buick with an assistant and a camera to both record your observations, everything from a Muslim center in Detroit to NASCAR. You go to Texas, you go to a football game, you go to the Republican convention, you go to the Democratic convention, you talk to celebrated authors and actors and at the same time everyday people. You have an experience with in Michigan with a highway patrolman who sees you, how do we say that, relieving yourself.
Yeah.
Because
yes.
It was a long road.
Yes, and this is the difference between France and America. In France, you can stop on the road and relieve yourself. So I thought that in America it was the same. I stopped, it was a very beautiful weather, sunny day, and I began. And after a few seconds I heard a roaring motor behind me, brakes of a car stopping. I turned, and it was a very huge and strong and policeman. What are you doing here? I said, I'm taking the sun. No, you are doing something else. Okay, I'm no right to. I'm sorry, I did not know I'm French. I don't care if you are French or anything. Okay, I'm a writer. I don't care if you are a writer. I wrote a book about that. I don't know. I'm on the footsteps of Tocqueville. What do you say? Alexis de Tocqueville, he said. I said, yes. And then this strong, redneck man became so soft, so gentle. Really, you know Alexis de Tocqueville? I nearly told him that he was a sort of family member. He said yes, and we began a conversation. He asked me what is different from the Tocqueville time to today, and so on and so on. And this is America. An average policeman, knowing better than we know us in France, Tocqueville, interested by it, interested by his country, and so on. This was a very little but very symbolical moment.
Powerful moment. Now,
yeah.
Tell me, de Tocqueville, you did not set out to retrace his steps, per se. You set out to do something that he had done, to come in search of America.
Yes, but I tried in the part of America which existed at his time. I tried to be more or less in his footsteps. For instance, I think that I arrived in Buffalo the very day he arrived himself. I tried to be in the footsteps. And I tried to see what is still true and what is no longer true in his hypothesis, in his doctrine of democracy.
Okay, talk about what he said about us and what you found to be true and not true. He had some fear about commercialism in America.
Of course. This is true. The fears were true. He said things about religion. He stressed, he was the first one to say how important religious feeling, faith is in this country. I felt that at every step of my journey. I never met one American, man and woman, daring to tell me that he was atheist. Nobody dared to tell me.
Nobody would say I'm an atheist.
I'm atheist. No, everybody belonged to a chapel, to a church, which was already the case. Tocqueville said that religion in this country goes on the same movement with freedom. He says, in my country, in France, freedom and religion are opposite. In America, they go the same rhythm. This is more or less true today. Sometimes it is true, sometimes there is a problem with religion and involvement in politics. Another thing which Tocqueville said, and which proves to be more than true, about the tyranny of majority. Tocqueville said, democracy is a great thing, but be careful, there can be a tyranny, a despotism of majority. And what is very interesting in America of today is that it sounds as if American people had heard that, the risk of tyranny and majority. And American society created some counter powers, a sort of machine, a genial machine to oppose to the tyranny of majority. For example, the communitarism, the rights of the minorities. Any minority in this country has its revendication, its right, and so on and so on. It is a sort of a way to counterbalance the tyranny of majority. So it is as if the American society had read the text and invented the way to the counter-poison to what the text announced, which could be a poison for American democracy. So there is a strange relationship between the Tocquevillian text and the very society of this country. But for example, one thing that Tocqueville did not foresee at all, and which is very important today, is the messianism of American democracy. The idea, the exceptionalism, the
right.
idea, I heard that at every step of my trip. The idea,
America is a unique nation.
Unique nation, having a universal message,
right.
having the right and the duty to bear it in the world. This Tocqueville, who was a contemporary of the first time of the democracy, Washington, Jefferson, and so on, did not foresee that. So this is interesting. What was foreseen, what was not?
When you went on this journey, was there any reaction to you as a Frenchman?
Of course not. This is an invention of the elites of this country. No. Everybody knew I was French. I met hundreds and hundreds of people in this country, from a waitress in a bar to policemen to average people. Never I felt the slightest despise or méfiance, the diffidence to me being a French.
And what did you find out about the difference between Republicans and Democrats?
This is a strange story. On one side, of course, you can feel that there is no difference, and you have some Republicans who voted for Kerry and some Democrats who vote for Bush. Richard Pearl, for instance,
right.
the very famous
neocon
is still a Democrat.
Right.
Ed Koch, the former mayor of New York, is still a Democrat, and he's a conservative. So on one side, you could feel that there is no real difference. On another side, if you see the thing with accuracy, I think that there is a very strong political debate, a very vibrant debate in this country, and that there is a real difference between the two, between the Republican and the Democrats. You have an ideological, a strong stream separating the two on the question of the taxes, of course,
right.
of the question of the relationship to Europe, of the question of the relationship to state. President Bush, this was incredible. I followed a few of his meetings, especially in Detroit, in front of the National Urban League. He was, the incredible thing, he was protesting against the officers of Washington, which means White House, as if he was not president.
He was running against himself.
He was running against himself. This is Republican ideology, which I don't stand. I don't say it is better.
Ronald Reagan did the same thing.
Did the same. So, contrary to what we think in Europe, and maybe contrary to some of you think also of your own country, I think that there is today a real strong debate going on in this country. I was impressed by that.
Since you did your trip and that formed the basis of this article and the book, these articles and the book, Condoleezza Rice is the new Secretary of State. She has gone to Europe. The President of the United States has gone to Europe. He has reached out to reconcile with the Germans and with the French and with other members of the European community. He has said we want to do things together. He's said we need you. He said, you know, we want to be partners, and we have all of that. Do you believe, because you have a history about being an anti-American, your history, you know, that phase of our tension with Europe is being healed?
I hope so. Because the tension with Europe, I think, is a disaster for Europe and also for America. If America breaks the ropes with Europe, if the temptation to reinvent a genuine civilization of its own, turning the back to Europe, takes shape, I think that it is a very bad thing for America. America is America, okay. It is not Europe, but there is a rope linking it to Europe. And the reverse, us to America. And this link has to be preserved. I definitely think that.
Yeah, but the worry on some is, in terms of some who worry that it is Europe, you know, who is not as interested in maintaining the relationship.
This is true. That's
as Washington. Henry Kissinger has said that a lot of the travels around the world that he makes, when he goes to see people in China and he goes to see people at other important Asian powers, they say the Europeans were just here and they want to know what we can do together to make both of us stronger than the Americans.
No question about that. I would say that if I was in a show like this one in my country, I shout against anti-Americanism, which is in my country not only an ideology, it is nearly a religion. The last religion of France is anti-Americanism. This is a point. We may try to speak about that, but consider it as a basic point. The last religion of Europe and sometimes of the world is anti-Americanism. Religion is in the very etymological meaning of the word, the thing which links people together. This is the religion, the thing which links people together. The hatred of America, the diabolization of America, the satanization of, I don't know, Richard Pearl. I met Richard Pearl in Washington. I had the image of him. I don't say that I agree with him. I don't. But I came to see Satan. According to what I heard in Europe, the Prince of the Darkness.
That's right, the Prince of Darkness.
Prince of Darkness. Also in America, he is called like this sometimes. And I met.
You enjoyed the conversation and found him to be a reasonable man with strong ideas.
Of course, strong ideas. Sometimes I agreed, sometimes I disagreed, but not this devil which was depicted by French ideology. So this is the point I fight against that in my country. But in this country, there is a temptation. In some intellectual debates, see Samuel Huntington, for instance, Who Are We?, his last book, and others, there is a temptation to think that there is a sort of original and singular way of being American which breaks with European heritage. And this also would be a catastrophe, on my opinion, for America. America is a very complex dialect. It's a great country. Being American is a sort of dream, but a dream which works in a dialectical circle between outside and inside. If you break the circle, then you will build, I don't know which society, but not the one that you, Charlie, live to be in, and for which you fight every night here.
Yeah. Well, interesting, one of the things that de Tocqueville said is that there was not enough public discourse in America. He did not feel like there was enough debate in America. Do you find that to be true, that there is not enough intellectual debate and political debate about important ideas, as there might be in Europe, in France, in Britain, in other places?
In a way, there is more here.
Exactly.
There is a scene, for instance, you will see in one of the next issues of The Atlantic, maybe in the fall. I was in Pittsburgh, for a double event. There was a lecture of Henry Kissinger in the Heinz Hall of Pittsburgh, and there was a counter lecture of Christopher Hitchens on the other side at the same hour. More or less, one at 7 o'clock, one at 9.
Well, there's a piece here on becoming American by Christopher Hitchens, but I also say this: Christopher Hitchens has written a book called The Trials of Henry Kissinger, which is suggesting that Henry Kissinger ought to be considered a war criminal.
Okay, I don't enter in that, but what I say, that if you hear Kissinger and Hitchens, you feel that even inside the right, there is a harshness, a violence, a radicality of the debate which we don't have in France. In a way, the situation reverse. That's why I finish one of my articles saying, to your good health, you Americans, à votre santé, you are going to understand what it is to be a country where there is a raging ideology, the ideological debate going very strong. You are going to discover that. There are some bad side and some good side.
But are you suggesting we're going to discover something the Europeans have already experienced?
Yes.
That's the idea.
I think that you are now in advance on this ground. Of course, we have been in Europe, and in France even more than in Europe, the fatherland of the ideology. Karl Marx said that.
Right.
La patrie de la politique, the fatherland of politics and of ideology. And we are living now, since a few decades, the end of ideologies. This is a theme that you heard that very often, the end of ideologies. While we are living the end of ideology, I think that here you are seeing the rebirth, the resurrection of ideologies.
Do you believe the American empire is over, is ending, is in decline?
I think, first of all, there is a word of the great writer Paul Morand, saying that American are involuntary romance, like Roman Empire, unwilling romance. So, when you talk about American empire, you have to be very careful. It is not an empire as we were us French imperialists.
Or Napoleonic, or
of course not. And when some say, I disagreed, for example, I said here at this very table with the war in Iraq. But one of the most stupid things I heard in my last years is that America went to Iraq because of oil. For instance, because of imperialistic will on oil. This was crazy. If America wanted the oil, the best way was to lift the sanctions, to lift the regulation of Saddam Hussein, and to make business with Saddam. So it is a different sort of empire. And for example, you will see in one of the next Atlantic, I visit once in maybe in last October, the military academy of Colorado Springs, which builds...
This is the Air Force Academy, isn't it?
Air Force, not military, Air Force, right. Air Force Academy. And I spent some time with them, with the general commanding the academy, with some average and middle officers and so on. Nothing is further from them than the idea of being the soldiers of a next empire. They are democratic Air Force, future Air Force officers. Some of them came in the job because of September 11. Some others came just because they love planes. I never heard one of them telling that he's here to defend the greatness all over the world of America. This is a myth. I think so. So empire, not in this way.
But what about American exceptionalism, the idea that America is an exceptional nation and that it has a moral mission in the world, and it has a democratic mission in the world? Because guess who's been quoting De Tocqueville? George Bush. On democracy.
Yes, but George Bush is wrong on this point, because Tocqueville, it is one thing which Tocqueville never said. Tocqueville never said that there was an exceptionalism and a special message and so on and so on. This is not in the text of Tocqueville. Mr. Bush he has something else to do. He has a lot of job, thanks God, to do. So maybe he did not read very accurately Tocqueville, but it is not in Tocqueville. But about the question of exceptionalism, it is a beautiful and dangerous idea. Beautiful, of course, because the idea that you have a role in promoting democracy all over the world, it's okay. I prefer that than the idea that you have to promote tyranny. I remember the time when I was young, when you had some Americans here who thought that they had to build Pinochet. Yeah. That they had to put napalm on Vietnam. Today,
or they had to support dictators because they were anti-Soviet.
Exactly. Today, the inheritors of these people support democracy, and they are crusaders of democracy. That's a big progress, and that is a beautiful idea. And when you discuss with neoconservatives, you must not forget that. On the other side, any people who think that he has a messianic mission should be very careful. There is no Messiah in this world.
There's no Messiah in this world.
No Messiah in this world. Inside, at the end of history, maybe in the other world, but not in this history. And when you believe that Messiah is here in this history,
you have a messianic mission. Yes.
Then you have big problems at the end of the day.
Do you, as a result of this journey, have a different opinion of America? You?
Of course.
And is it better or worse or different?
Different, sure. I thought I knew America. I did not know America.
What didn't you know?
First of all, the
power of religion, the power of patriotism.
First of all, very physical things. The distance. The distance. Yes. When you go coast,
when you drive it, you'll get a sense of it.
When you drive coast to coast, from Newport to Seattle, and from Seattle to the border.
Long stretches of which there is nothing but open space.
Nothing but, exactly, but open space. But open space in America is not void, is not emptiness. Open space is not empty. It is full of something else, desert. Yeah. I know today what desert is, the very solidness, the strength of desert. You have incredible experiences in desert. So the sense of the distance, this is the thing I learned here. The variety and the unity of these people, of American people. What does it mean to be an American? Before that, I knew what it was to be a New Yorker, a New Yorkese man.
Right.
This I know. Okay.
A New York Yankee man or a New Yorker?
New Yorker, a New Yorker. I knew that. Now, to be an American is such a different thing and such a strange thing. What is the unity between a Korean of Los Angeles, an Arab of Detroit, a Jew of New York,
but you talk about,
and an Hispanic of Miami?
Okay, but before we go, tell me about the U.S. You went to a Muslim center in Detroit.
Yeah.
And you find one more example of the immigrant experience at that place.
Absolutely. It is really a special place. The McDonald's is halal.
Right.
The Libertine Club has a Muslim name. I saw a car with the numbers, the mock numbers, the platter called Taliban.
Yes.
So strange place. really, but it was a joke, I'm sure, but really linked to this Arab identity, but American patriotism, much more than in my country. In my country, very often the Arab minority, Arab origin minority, they manifest their hatred to France. They whistle to the song La Marseillaise. In America, as soon as they arrive, they manage to make together the link with the Arab culture and the American patriotism. And this is incredible. This is incredible. And I saw that everywhere. This is what, for instance, again, I quoted Huntington before, who is a great scholar, the thing he did not understand in the last book about the Hispanic second language people.
He says we're changing because of the influx of Hispanics to America. The American identity has changed. The American sense of who it means to be American is changing. You
are not changing, because the Hispanic are becoming American. What is America today? America is a factory to build Americans. You know? What is America? It is an act of will. It is the will and the dream of being American. This is what I discovered. To be French is to believe that you have a common blood and common roots with your neighbors. This is to be French. And this creates racism, anti-Semitism, and so on. This is very often, not always, to be French. To have a common blood, to have a common roots, and to have a common memory. In America, there is not such a memory. It is a short memory. There is not a common blood. Everybody is comes from so few Native Americans. And who is a Native American? Is it an Indian? Is it Russell Mintz? Or is it Charlie Rose? You know what? So Americans are coming from everywhere. To be American is to decide to be American. And this, if it is really followed, it is the most bright idea of nationhood.
Okay, but are our best years behind us because of the rise of Asia in terms of economic and political power?
It could, but it is not the most difficult stake which is opposed to America.
Because we've never been stronger militarily or economically.
Of course. You have now to afford, you have to challenge that. You had some others challenge in the past. You have this challenge of China, which is a real problem today, and of the Asian markets, which is a real problem too. Maybe you will not do it, maybe you will. It is the next challenge.
Here's what you say, back to your notion of Arabs who come to the United States. The question of twofold allegiance that is poisoning the debate in France about where one belongs does not arise here. Nassim Beydoun is a high-spirited young businessman. It takes me a while to pick up that when he says we, he means not we Arabs, but we Americans.
Exactly.
This is a story about America. America in foreign eyes. A Frenchman hits the road and takes our measure by Bernard-Henri Lévy. He is a friend of this broadcast. I am pleased to have him here. Perhaps we can check back with him as other issues of the Atlantic Monthly come out, then a book by Random House in the fall. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Charlie.
Great to see you.
Great.
Here is a magazine, the Atlantic Monthly, American Foreign Eyes. A Frenchman hits the road and takes our measure. It is based on retracing the steps of Alexis De Tocqueville. His book, Democracy in America, is frequently on the list of most high schools and colleges' reading list. Bernard-Henri Lévy will also be at the New York Public Library on April 6th, engaged in dialogue with New York Times columnist David Brooks. Call the New York Public Library for details. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.